Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to analyze the Hindu New Delhi edition dated 4th of December 2019. Displayed on the screen is the list of articles that we are going to discuss today. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description of the video. Let's begin. We have taken this article from page number 14 and it talks about US threatens 100% tariff on French goods. Now, at the outset, it looks like a trade related dispute between the US and France. But at the same time, it is important for us to understand what is digital service tax. At the same time, it is important for us to understand what is GAFA tax and what is equalization levy. Now, before moving further, let's first understand the context of the news. Now, recently, French Parliament has imposed digital service tax by the name of GAFA, which refers to Google, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon. Now, these are big technology-based internet companies, and they have business operations in France. Now, at the same time, these companies avoid paying any kind of tax to the French government. Now, the French government is of the opinion that these digital service providers use the data and information of their local population and they earn huge money out of it, and hence they should pay taxes in that country as well. In this consideration, the French government has imposed GAFA tax. Now, since these companies are based out of US and hence US has decided to impose a retaliatory custom duty in relation to the French government's decision. Now, the US has decided to impose 100% duty for the goods imported from the France, and this will be equal to around $2.4 billion. So, in this context, it is important for us to understand what is digital service tax, what is GAFA tax, and what is equalization levy. At the same time, we need to understand what is the need of such tax. Now, let's first understand the need of such digital service tax. Now, we know that over a period of last decade, information technology has gone through an exponential expansion phase in the world. This has led to increase in supply and procurement of digital services. Consequently, this has given rise to various new business models where there is heavy reliance on digital and telecommunication networks. As a result of new business models that have come up in the age of this digital era, this has set up a new kind of tax challenge in form of nexus, characterization, valuation of data and user contribution. The combination of inadequacy of physical presence, based nexus rules in the existing tax treaties, and the possibility of taxing such payments as royalty or fee for technical services creates a fertile ground for tax disputes. And this is why digital services tax is being discussed and implemented across the world. In this context, it is important for us to understand what is GAFA tax and what is equalization levy. Now, one thing is very clear to us that when we talk about digital service tax, it is a tax imposed on big technological and internet based companies within the territory of a particular country. And this tax has been based on a particular idea that these internet based or technology companies are using data to earn revenue from these countries, and hence on this revenue they should pay tax to the government. So this is what the central idea is, and in this context let's understand more about GAFA tax and equalization levy. So the focus of our discussion now is GAFA tax. Now, first and foremost, it is clear to us that it is more of a digital service tax which is imposed on big technological and internet based companies. At the same time, this digital service tax is imposed by a country. And since we are talking about the GAFA, the country in contention is France. Now, there are some guidelines about how GAFA will be implemented. Now, the first and foremost thing is that the companies which are going to pay tax to the government, they should have a worldwide revenue of more than 750 million euros. At the same time, these companies must earn at least 25 million euro from France only. So these are the two basic conditions. If these conditions are satisfied, then 3% of the revenue in the form of GAFA tax needs to be paid to the government. Now please understand that this tax is on revenue and not on profit, and hence it will be difficult for these companies to evade this tax. Now let us try to understand the rationale behind the GAFA tax or any kind of a digital service tax. Now, as already mentioned, that the kind of digital boom that we have seen in the recent past has changed the nature and complexion of the services that we consume. At the same time, these companies can be based anywhere, but they use technology, especially artificial intelligence, to predict behavior pattern of consumers. On the basis of these behavioral pattern, they can advertise goods and services, and which can actually induce people to use or buy those services. Now, this is something that we need to understand, that now these companies must not have a physical presence in a center, and yet they can participate in business and trade activities. And this is where the current norms are not suitable for online services that we normally see. And this is the rationale behind the GAFA as well. Now let us take an example to understand this process in detail. Now we all have digital footprints on internet, and these digital footprints are being tracked by various service providers. Let's take an example of Google in this case. Now Google has a very specific algorithm which basically defines the behavioral pattern of individuals and what they are expected to buy at what point of time. Now this can be understood in a very simple fashion. You can open your browser and on the Google you search something that you want to buy. Suppose a pair of shoes. Once you do that, in no time, whatever sites you will visit, you will start seeing the type of search you have already made. And this is the entire mechanism of personalized digital advertisement. Since Google has already accessed the information in terms of what kind of a purchase you are going to make, this personalized digital advertisement has got huge revenue potential. So, using artificial intelligence, algorithm, and the data which was generated on a local basis, Google can make huge revenues, and this is where the governments are targeting. Governments want that out of these huge revenue which are generated in a specific territory, they should be paid a part of the revenue. And this is what the purpose of GAFA tax is all about. Similarly, when we talk about equalization levy, it is similar to the digital service tax, and this is implemented in India. However, terms of equalization levy are different from what we have seen in GAFA. This is more of a direct tax and the payment is made by the service recipient. Now, when we say service recipient, suppose there is an entity A which advertises on Facebook, and Facebook in this case is non-resident service provider. So if the annual payment from A to Facebook exceeds rupees 1 lakh an year, then the person has to cut 6% from the payment to be made to Facebook and give it to the government. And this is what equalization levy is all about. At the same time, this is applicable for online advertisement or any provision for digital advertising space or facilities. So in this fashion, you have understood about that equalization levy is much similar to GAFA tax, and both of them can be categorized as digital service tax. We have taken this news from page number 1 and page number 12. This news says GST revenues not enough for states compensation, and this has been reported by Center. Now in this context, the news is important from the perspective of economy, and as a subtopic, it will be part of taxation. Now before analyzing the news, let's first understand the context. Now all of us are already aware that there is an economic slowdown which is continuing in our country. With the fall in the economic activity, the collection of GST has gone down. And since the collection of GST has gone down, this has made another thing very difficult, that GST compensation cess that union government is expected to pay to the states in order to cover for their losses. Now when lesser amount of GST compensation cess is collected, it has actually impacted transfer of GST revenues to the states. And in this context, it is important for us to know what is going on in this field. Now, for this, let's take the help of this diagram. Now, we know that GST was introduced as a major tax reform, and it was aimed at simplifying and rationalizing the indirect tax system in India. Now, when GST was established, it actually led to subsuming of a number of center and state indirect taxes like excise duty and service tax, etc. Now, some of the states have expressed their apprehension that introduction of GST would lead to fall in their revenue. So here we can see that there is GST, and this GST is divided between center and the states. Now earlier, the states were focusing more on VAT and octroi duty, etc. And these states feared that once GST is implemented, it may lead to fall in the revenue. Now, in order to allay these fears, central government, through a constitutional guarantee, promised that states will not incur any kind of loss. The central government promised that it will compensate for all the losses that a state might incur. At the same time, there will be 14% growth revenue for all the states for the next 5 years, and this is called as GST compensation. Now, one of the ways to fund this GST compensation is that GST compensation cess was implemented on luxury and sin goods, which attracted the slab rate of 28%. So, in this fashion, the GST compensation cess got funded from the cess on luxury and sin goods, and then this money is transferred to the states to ensure that they get 14% growth in their revenue year on year basis. Now, in order to understand the problem, first thing is that Indian economy is under a slowdown. Now, since economic slowdown is there, the GST collection has been less. And since GST collection is less, so the allocation of the center and state is suffering. Now, center has already promised that whatever loss in the revenue that is going to happen because of the change in the tax system, that will be compensated by the central government. Now, the problem is economic slowdown has led to low recovery of GST, and this has impacted the GST compensation cess as well. And now the central government has communicated that it does not have enough money to pay for the state's compensation. Now, this is the entire situation that you need to understand. Now, let us try to understand this problem in figures. The state's average compensation requirement has shot up from rupees 5,800 crores in 2018 and 19 to about rupees 17,000 crores in April to October period in the current fiscal. Because of the lack of payment from the central government to the states, many state governments have requested the center to make immediate transfer of the money. Actually, it is estimated that the shortfall of around 28,000 crores is going to happen for the period of June and July, and which are yet to be paid by the central government. Some states like West Bengal and Punjab have requested the central government to make transfer immediately. At the same time, government of Punjab has threatened central government to move to the Supreme Court. Now, this situation is actually very difficult for states as well, because central government under no condition is going to take out money from the Consolidated Fund of India if the proceeds from the cess turn out to be insufficient. And this is what you need to understand from the perspective of GST collection, at the same time the problems that states are encountering. Now, this leads us to the question about what should be done in order to increase the GST revenue. Now, the first thing that we need to do is the rationalization of tax rates. Now, it is recommended that GST Council should raise taxes on items that are either taxed very low or not taxed at all. Now, here we can see that for fixing GST rates, which is very critical, we can see that the tax can be increased in the slab rates of 5 and 12. And this is where GST rates will boost revenues significantly. For all those items which are already taxed at 18 and 28%, increasing taxes in this slab will actually lead to the lower consumption, and it will not be useful in terms of boosting the GST collection. At the same time, the second important aspect is ensuring tax compliance. Now, we know that some of the traders have been generating fake invoices to avail input tax credit. Now, recently, central government was able to catch an ITC, that is input tax credit fraud, of around 11,500 crores. It is estimated that total tax fraud under the input tax credit is around 1 lakh crore. Now, this can also lead us to the conclusion that if we remove this tax fraud, all states can be compensated for the deficit that they are facing right now. Last but not the least, the idea is to expand the tax base. In the current scheme, GST excludes various petroleum products like petroleum crude, high speed diesel, natural gas, aviation turbine fuel, etc. There is an emergent need to bring these under the GST net, and this will also ensure that center will have sufficient funds to compensate for the losses of the states. At the same time, it is important to highlight that central government is seeking opinion from the states to increase the GST tax base. And for this purpose, state has been asked to look into the products which are currently exempted from GST. So in the way forward, it can be suggested that more products can be brought under the tax net of GST, and this will also boost the GST revenue. So, in this way, the GST revenues will increase, GST compensation cess will increase, and the central government will be in a position to transfer sufficient funds to the state's corpus. We have taken this article from page number 4, and it talks about India tests Swedish technology to reduce stubble burning. Now, this article is important, especially from the perspective of environment and ecology, and it is also important for science and technology. At the same time, this topic is important more from the perspective of the prelims examination, and in this context, it is important for you to understand the process and how biocoal is being produced through this process. Now, all of us are aware that India is suffering from a pollution crisis. And when we talk about National Capital Region or NCR, the problem of air pollution is too high, especially during winters. Now, one of the things which basically fuels problem of pollution in Delhi is the stubble burning resorted by farmers of Punjab. One of the points that these farmers highlight is that they do not have enough technology or resources to not resort to stubble burning. And in order to prepare their farms for the next crop, they resort to stubble burning. In this context, it is important to understand what is the solution that Swedish company has provided for the conversion of biomass to biocoal. In this context, a Swedish company, BioEndev, has used the technology of torrefaction, and through this technology, they can convert the biomass into biocoal. Now let's try to understand what is the need of conversion of biomass to biocoal. Now when we see biomass in its current context, it is full of volatile materials. These do not burn properly, and this leads to pollution. So the idea of converting biomass to biocoal is very simple. Through this technology of torrefaction, in the volatile material is being removed, and the process torrefied biomass is produced, which is much more like coal itself. Now, in this context, the process is very simple. Let's understand through the diagram given on the screen. Now, here we can see there is untreated biomass. When we say untreated biomass, it means it has high degree of volatile material. It is first dried up. Now, in the process of drying, the moisture content is reduced. Normally, in the biomass, there is 25 to 30% moisture content. Now, once it is dried, then it is sent for the torrefaction process. And in the torrefaction process, what is ensured that the less oxygen is available. We need to understand if more oxygen is available, then this fuel will burn in this process. What will happen if we use less oxygen? Then the volatile material is burnt and the tar gas is released. And this tar gas can be used for two separate things. First, it can be used for drying purpose again. And second important aspect is this gas, tar gas, the combustor gas, can also be utilized for the process of torrefaction. So this has multiple usages in terms of tar gas itself. So when the volatile material gets burned, it can be utilized for drying as well as for fueling the torrefaction process again. Now after this process is complete, it means when volatile material is reduced to the minimum level, then it goes for the compacting. And in this fashion, torrefied biomass or coal is produced in this process of torrefaction. Now, in this process, the biomass is heated at around 250 to 350 degrees Celsius, as mentioned, in a low oxygen temperature. It is also important to understand that since we are talking about biomass, hemicellulose in the biomass decompose, and this transforms the biomass from a fibrous low quality fuel to good quality fuel. And in this fashion, black wood pellets are being produced, and these can be utilized for multiple purposes. At the same time, it reduces pollution, and the fuel produced has low sulfur and ash content. Now, let's try to understand some more benefits of this technology. Now, the first benefit that we can talk about the torrefied pellets is that it burns like a coal, and hence existing infrastructure can be used without any modification. Second important aspect is that these are compacted as well, and hence when we transport them, there is lower shipping and transport cost involved in comparison to the biomass, which is very voluminous to transport. The third important aspect is that when we talk about this type of a coal, that is biocoal, even if it is used for the power plants, you do not need to derate power plants as ash content is low. So it is almost at par with the same kind of a coal that we use for power plant. At the same time, this biocoal can be used for steel and other industries. Third important aspect is since the volatile material is reduced and hence this fuel produces low sulfur and ash content. And the last important aspect is this can actually lead to non-intermittent renewable energy. Now we know that India is primarily an agriculture country and hence the supply of biomass can be ensured in long run. Now Bio and Dave has set up a plant in Mohali and which can treat 30,000 ton of residue every year. So if this can be applied on a wider scale, this can actually help in protecting environment and ensuring cleaner air in Delhi and neighboring areas. We have taken this editorial from page number 10 and it talks about national shame. It further goes on to speak that gender sensitization and wider societal change are needed to end sex crimes. Now, all of us are aware that one veterinary doctor in Hyderabad was raped and brutally murdered, and which shook the sensibility of one and all in our country. Now, in the wake of the recent rape crime, which is growing at a very fast pace, there is a demand for a stricter law against rape crimes, including death penalty for the convicts. At the same time, in the editorial, the author highlights that member of parliaments have somehow advocated lynching of rapists. This shows the sorry state of affairs in terms of our MPs. At the same time, even the MPs do not have trust in law and order of the country. This is a very alarming situation. In this context, it is important for us to understand the extent of problem, especially rape, and what can be done to improve situation in India. Now, there are few things that are very important for us to understand in terms of information. Now, according to the NCRB, that is, which means National Crime Records Bureau, rape accounts for about 12% of all crimes against women in India. Now, it is important for us to understand that this number, 12%, is more of an understatement. Let's discuss this thing in the following points. Now, according to NCRB data, the number of rape cases has doubled in last 10 years. In 2007, the number of rape cases, when we talk about rape cases, we are talking about the reported cases, shot up from 20,000 to 40,000 in 2016. Now, the report shows that there is a 6% rise in crimes against women and 3.59 lakh cases, out of which rape constitute for 7%. Now, we need to understand that crime against women and especially rape are much more heinous in nature and they scar the person for a lifetime. Now, at the same time, one of the reasons for the recent increase in rape case is increase in the reporting of the rape cases as well. At the same time, now we follow a broader definition of the rape. As the society is becoming educated and well informed, people are in a position to accept that something has wrong that has happened to them and they are not responsible for that. At the same time, they need to report the cases so that the perpetrator of the crime can be arrested or can be put behind bars. So this is the reason why there is an increase in the rape cases. And when we say increase in the cases, we are focusing on reporting of rape cases. At the same time, the reporting of sexual violence has increased manifold in India, especially after the infamous Nirbhaya case. Now there is a better reporting. At the same time, the rape laws have become more stringent and definition of the rape has become much more broad. At the same time, there is a better level of awareness amongst people and more cases of rape are reported because people realize that there is a need to report such cases to police and put the people who are responsible behind the bars. Now, still, this situation is a very sorry state of affairs. Why? Because about 99% of the cases still go unreported because people feel that they will be ostracized in this process. And hence, many perpetrators of such crime go scot free. Besides, the conviction rate in such cases is very low. It hardly goes beyond 25% in India. Now, this again shows that we need to do much more in terms of ensuring justice to the people who have suffered on account of crime against them. And in this case, we are talking about rape. In the context of this case, we need to focus on the reported rate of sexual violence. When we say per million females, it means 10 lakh females. Here we can see that in 2001 onwards, the rate was 120.73. So it means that out of 10 lakh women, 120.73 have faced sexual violence. Now, this rate has remained more or less constant till 2012, and this rate was 133.23 when Delhi gang rape happened. And since then, this figure has skyrocketed. In 2016, it was 214.51. So, this shows the sorry state of affairs in our country. Now, in this context, it is important for us to understand the laws against sexual violence. Now, when we talk about sexual offense, there are three sections under IPC, that is section 376, which says rape, sexual intercourse without consent. Section 354, assault on a woman outraging her modesty. And section 377, which says unnatural act defined as carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal. Besides, child sex abuse is covered under the POCSO Act. So these are the basic rules which are listed in IPC, and you should keep a note of that. That is section 376, section 354, and section 377. Now, after the Nirbhaya case, the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013 or Nirbhaya Act was passed. It is considered as a landmark in legal landscape against sexual violence in India. At the same time, this act was amended on the basis of Justice J.S. Verma Committee. The Amendment Act broadened the definition of sexual violence, and it included voyeurism under 354C, stalking 354D, physical contact, unwelcoming sexual behavior, demand for sexual favor, showing pornography against will, and passing sexually colored remarks, etc. At the same time, Nirbhaya Act, at the same time, it also made provisions for imprisonment up to 20 years, extendable to life imprisonment in cases of gang rape, death in cases of repeat offenders, and 10-year imprisonment extendable up to life imprisonment in case of acid attack. Besides, the law also declared sexual activity of any kind with or without consent with minors under the age of 18 as rape. Moreover, with the purpose to strengthen the Criminal Law Amendment Act, the government in 2018 launched the National Database on Sexual Offenders as central database of sexual offenders to be maintained by NCRB. Now, through this database, it becomes easy to identify the people who can be responsible for such cases. Now, it is important for us to understand that we need to take better measures to stop rape. For this purpose, we require better policing. And when we say better policing, it means fear of law. At the same time, there is a need of fast track courts and quick sentencing of people who get involved in such cases. At the same time, gender sensitization is a very important aspect, especially in formative years. And for this purpose, sex education should be given at school level. At the same time, we need to sensitize people about gender as well. Third important aspect is public places should be made safer for all. And in this direction, various states have launched panic button in public transport. Last but not the least, we need to protect our victims as well. People at times resort to victim blaming, slut shaming, and that should be curbed immediately. In this direction, cyber crimes have been reported and people are booked for those shaming victim on social media. So people need to become much more responsible, and for this purpose, the law and people should go hand in hand. We have taken this news from page number 13, and it talks about DRDO to develop naval fighter jet. Now, this article is important from the perspective of why do we need a naval fighter or why do we need a strong navy. So, in this context, let's try to understand the situation at hand. Now, the first and foremost thing is that Indian Ocean region, which is also called as IOR, is a significant geopolitical theater. And why it is called significant geopolitical theater? Because both India and China are trying to dominate this region. At the same time, there is presence of US, UK, and many superpowers like France, etc. Now, in this context, it is important for India to have a strong navy so that its presence can be accepted and defended at the same time. Moreover, India has also locked horns with Pakistan and it needs to protect its sea routes. Hence, this is a very important aspect of geopolitical significance. Now, second important aspect is that Indian Ocean region is of strategic interest as well. Now, two-thirds of global oil, half of the container traffic, and one-third of cargo passes from Indian Ocean region. And hence, this is very important for India's strategic interest. At the same time, safety and security of this region is important for Indian and global economy. The third important aspect is that Chinese influence is growing in the Indian Ocean region. Now, when we talk about Chinese influence, China has made deals with Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Myanmar to develop seaports, and hence Chinese influence has been increasing in the recent past. In this context, India has to be ready to stand against any kind of challenge which is thrown at its sovereignty. So, India reoriented its strategy in October 2017 with a new mission based deployment plan for the deployment of warships in the Indian Ocean region. Now, as far as this plan is concerned, it involves deploying mission ready ships and aircraft along the critical sea lanes of communication. Accordingly, the operational requirement of Indian Navy has significantly gone up and requires some major capability upgrade. And when we talk about INS Vikrant, which would be operational from 2020, it requires naval fighter jets, and for this purpose, naval version of Tejas is being developed and it should be available by 2026. Further, in order to increase its blue water navy capabilities, India needs to upgrade its capacity. So, in this context, this article is important more from the perspective of prelims, and for this purpose, you need to know more about aircraft carrier. In the PDF of this video, we have included the list of some of the ships. Please take a note of that and go through them. Now, from today's newspaper, we haven't taken these news as highlighted in your screen. The first is a tightrope walk for monetary policy panel members. This is published on page number 15. At the same time, this article talks about the kind of challenge for the monetary policy. Now, we know that the accepted level of inflation is around 4%, and as the RBI goes for rate cut, it is expected that inflation may rise to 5.8%. So, in this case, it is expected that monetary policy panel members will make a decision which is best for them. So, this is what is mentioned in the article. This article is in transition. Once the monetary policy panel members meet and they come with a concrete policy, we will analyze this news. The second important news that you might feel is from page number 10, and it talks about headwinds after the hardline approach. Now, as far as this article is concerned, this article is related more to Xi Jinping. Now, the hardline approach that Mr. Xi Jinping has followed in the recent past has become his nemesis, especially in the Hong Kong protest. In this context, the author is analyzing what Xi Jinping would do in the time to come. And in this context, this article is important more from the perspective of China's internal policy. It may have some impact for the external world as well, but at the same time, that is nothing more than a conjecture. And hence, we haven't taken this for discussion. The third article is there on page number 11, and it talks about structural policies needed for 7+% growth. Now, this article has been talked about many times over in various forms. Now, we have discussed this article in terms of slowdown in economy and steps that are required to revive the economy. Since this article is done multiple times in last 1 month, at least 5 to 6 times, and in this article there was nothing new, and hence we haven't taken this article. Now, many times some of you comment that we haven't taken some of the important articles. It is important for you to understand that when we give any article a skip, the purpose is very clear. We should avoid repetition, and hence these articles are not picked. Now, on page number 11, there is an article which talks about setting the clock back on intersex human rights. Now, this talks about the provisions of Transgender Persons Bill, and this topic is much similar to what we have already discussed on 27th of November 2019. Now, in this analysis, which was published on 27th of November, Mr. Weber Mishra has explained the provisions of Transgender Bill in detail. In this context, it is advisable that you go through this article once again to revise the basic provisions of Transgender Bill. On the page number 10, there is an article which talks about one state push for Israel and Palestine. Now, this topic basically deals the kind of encroachment Israel has done on the land territory of Palestine and neighboring countries. Now, this topic again was covered in detail on 21st of November 2019 by Mangal sir. Now, it is important that we go through the locations as specified in the map. You can see here the West Bank has been defined and many other important locations are also highlighted. In this context, it is important for you to go through the article to identify the important geographical locations from the map. Now, based on today's discussion, let's take a practice question. Practice question 1. GAFA is related to which of the following? First, it is a region in West Asia occupied by Israel. Second, it is a digital service tax of France. Third, it is a conflict zone in Yemen. And fourth, none of the above. The correct answer is B, that is, it is a digital service tax of France. Let's move to question number 2. With respect to GST implementation, which of the following is said to increase tax revenue of the central government? Statement 1 is e-way bill, second is timely refund, and third is compensation to the states. Now, we know that if e-way bill and timely refund is implemented, it will increase the tax base, and hence this will lead to increase in the tax revenue of the government. At the same time, compensation to the state is not going to increase the tax revenue, and hence statement 3 can be eliminated. By this logic, the correct answer is option C, that is 1 and 2. Third is torrefaction is related to which of the following? First is reflection of light in vacuum, change in policies of Tories in UK, technology for biocoal, and fourth is protection of ozone. The correct answer is option C, torrefaction is related to a Swedish technology which converts biomass to biocoal, and hence option C is the correct answer. With this, we have come to the end of today's session. Let's move to the question of the day.